I feel honored to welcome our guest, Mr. Valdmer Prado. He has been a member of World Association for former United Nations Interns and Fellows, and since 2003 as a Senior Research Fellow in Science and Technology for Development, and currently serving as an Executive Vice President of the organization. He has been teaching and on research positions at several universities in Mexico, Latin America, and US. During this time, he has been involved in developing and implementing technology solutions for development in emerging and developing countries. Held professorship in physics, mathematics, computer science, biomedical science, and technology. He has been commissioned to participate in the different forums and conferences at ECO, SOC, DPI, and WSIS in topics related with the impact of ITCs and development, as well as the transfer of technology at the United Nations. He also has been involved and consulted in financing for development projects for communities in several regions of the world. He also has been consultant, advisor, and facilitator for science and technology transfer for the government of Chile, Colombia, Peru, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Panama, Venezuela, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Brazil, and Mexico. Also in the areas of creation of local capacities. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Valdmer Prado.
Hi, hold on for a second, please. I'm trying to find my image. Okay, I would like to start with a very famous prayer. It says in Sanskrit, Asatoma Sadkamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityoma Mritam Gamaya. From the unreal, lead me to the real. From the darkness, lead me to the light. From death, lead me to immortality. Hi, everybody. I'm very honored to participate in this event. And my topic today is spirituality and self-control. In order to start this dissertation, I think it's important to understand several things previously to defining our topic, since self-control has been preached in many religions from endless times. And usually spirituality has been confused with religiousness. And they are two different things. In this case, most religions preach some form of self-control. But in many cases, because they don't explain the mechanism that act upon us, they end up confusing self-control with repression. And it's very important that we don't do in this talk. So that's why it's important to understand the mechanism behind our impulses, our biological impulses, and also the difference between repression and a healthy self-control, which is necessary for society to live. In the process of psychological development, we go through several stages, and these stages have been recognized in modern science, but also since ancient times in many of the Eastern traditions. According to Eastern traditions, in the first 7 years of life, we catch up with what we left in our past lives. So the first years of life, we use them in order to catch up or to come back to where we were before we died. And in modern psychology, the process of psychological development goes through several stages. There are many models, but I'm going to just mention the one that is most widely accepted. When we are born, we have all the potential in the process of developing, there are several stages in which we are presented with the obstacles. And naturally, if we grow healthy, then we have all the energy to come across these obstacles. In many cases, because of the circumstances, because our previous karmas or our previous lives, we don't have these resources, and either the environment or internal psychologically situations, we cannot overcome these obstacles. And then we develop ways around these obstacles in order to continue to grow physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. When we develop these instances of overcoming these obstacles, we develop neurotic processes for the obstacles that we cannot overcome. And these neurotic processes are the ones that basically veil our lives with many different problems. Basically, those are the things that make us unhappy. And in the process of becoming healthy, we have to overcome these obstacles. We have to find ways of bringing them to the consciousness and work on them through forms of self-control. In this process, there are several stages, as I mentioned, that form with our personality. We are born in a family, in a religion, in a political environment, whatever. And as we go through the process of growth, things are given to us. We are given a name, a last name, a family name. We are given a language, an ideology, etc. And this set of factors build on us what we call the personality or the character. And in other words, there are some internal pulsions, mainly biological, to be in certain way, to react to the environment in certain way. But we learn through society education that certain things are not permitted in society because they are detrimental to the person and to the society. So we are educated in a certain way, and we end up having some internal pulsions to be a certain way, and then there's another superstructure that is built upon us, which tells us to control ourselves. And this can happen, this control can be, as I mentioned, it can be natural, it can be in form of repression, or it can be brought in a healthy way. So when we are born, basically the first part that is built upon us is the part that is very linked to the biological processes. And in many schools of psychology, they call it the id, which means in something like in Latin means that's what it is. And basically, is a very important component of personality. And is the source of bodily needs, wants, emotional impulses, and desires, especially aggression and libido, or sex drive. The id is always acting according to the pleasure principle. The psychic forces oriented to immediate gratification of impulses and desire, and also of aggression. And of course, the avoidance of pain. And in general, psychologically, is considered that this is mainly unconscious. So as we grow, we start throwing these things back into our subconscious. But also in our, say, in our spirit, in our soul, there's the impulse to become better human beings. And so at the same time, we come naturally with this instinctual part. We also come with another part, or another part is formed, as I mentioned, through society education, or family education, or religion education. we are told that we must control ourselves. But funny enough, this, not everybody comes with the same potential, but also with the same capabilities, because of karmic reasons, because of circumstances in the karmic of our society or of our family. And then another structure. So there is the id and the superego that basically is created through society in order to help us gain self-control. And then in the middle of the two, just juggling between the two, is what is called the ego or the I. And it acts according to the reality principle. It seeks the pleasure of the I's drive in realistic ways that in the long term bring benefit rather than grief. At the same time, many psychologists consider that the ego attempts to mediate between the id and the reality, and is often forced to cloak the unconscious to its own precocious rationalizations to conceal or to give up with the conflicts of the ego and the superego. Okay. In the Western psychology, this is the image. Okay. It is amazing that for instance, in the Vedantic tradition, we are driven by mainly two, let's say, instinctual drives. The drive for power and recognition, and the drive for pleasure. In this, this basically is similar to what we study in Western psychology. And then there is another part in which we are taught to live a dharmic life, a life with principle, moral principles. And in order to tame these other two parts, the kama or the pleasure, and also the drive for power and selfishness, and the drive for money or material goods, that is called artha in the Vedantic tradition. And if we live a dharmic life, that will help us to get to what's called a moksha or liberation. We can liberate ourselves from pain and suffering, and we achieve liberation. Okay, and something that is very important is understand how the human being is built in the Samkhya tradition or in the Eastern traditions. In the Eastern traditions, we are taught that our mind, we identify ourselves, we believe ourselves to be the thoughts of our mind, our body, our feelings or emotions, but we are none of this. These are just instruments that we are given in order to experience the world. And so in the Eastern tradition, there is something that is called the antakarana, or the whole psychological process, including emotions and thoughts and so forth. The antakarana basically has four elements. The ahankara, which it identifies the Atman or the self with the body as the I, or the sense of I-ness. The attachment or identification of the ego, also known as the I-ness. And then we have the buddhi, which is the intellect, the decision-making part of the mind, the part that is able to discern the truth from falsehood and thereby to make wisdom possible. And the third element is called the manas, which, by the way, the word mind in the Western tradition comes from this word, the lower rational part of the mind that connects with the external world and controls the sankalpa, or the will, or the capacity to take decisions. It is also the faculty of doubt and volition, and is the seat of desire and governor of sensory and motor organs. And then finally, the chitta, or the memory, the conscious, or the part of the consciousness where impressions and memories are experienced, are stored in part that deals with remembering and forgetting. And then on top of this, there are basically three stages of consciousness: the Jagrat, or the waking state, the Svapana, or the dream state, and the Shushupati, or the deep state. Ahamkara works in the first two, in the waking state and in the dream state. And in the deep sleep state, basically we go unconscious. It doesn't affect, the inner vehicle or the inner instrument doesn't affect this last part. So in the Eastern tradition, it's considered that the mind, is continuously flowing from one thought to another, and we tend to identify ourselves with these trains of thoughts. And basically, there are several techniques or ways of overcoming this process. And one of them is basically training the mind to be stable, training the mind to concentrate, train the mind not to let the mind drive away with any thought that comes to us. And so it doesn't, basically the techniques had to do with practices such as meditation, the practice of asanas, the practice of pranayama, and some other techniques that have to do with the control of the body. In the Western tradition, it has been discovered that in our process of growth, many of the neurotic processes get nested or stored in the body. The body is like the reservoir of our frustrations and things that we could not overcome. And it becomes in what is called muscular shields. And there are some techniques, especially in Hatha Yoga, in which you take out these knots that form in your body and they give shape to the body. And by doing so, this energy that we're stored in these parts of our body comes surface to the conscious thought, and then it's possible to resolve them. It's possible to overcome the neurotic processes that we didn't do in our infancy. And also, Ashtanga Yoga proposes that in order to be a practitioner of yoga or to look for liberation, to samadhi, there are certain principles that we must follow, and those are called yamas and niyamas. And yamas basically are things that we should not do, that should avoid doing, like not lying, not stealing, not misusing our nannies, and etc. And yamas are things that we have to practice. We have to practice meditation. We have to practice cleanliness of thought. We have to practice good deeds. We have to practice study. We have to study the scriptures, and we have to practice with a teacher or with the guru to guide us through the process. So, in the Eastern tradition, there are techniques that are aimed so that we can have a healthy self-control in order to allow our true spirituality, our true consciousness to surface into our lives. In the Eastern traditions, there are specifically two practices in the Ashtanga Yoga, which is Dharana and Dhyana, and that help us to train the mind so that the mind doesn't drive us or doesn't drive our, by the trains of thoughts, our feelings and our actions. And especially concentration and meditation, the two previous steps to samadhi, are the ones that are aimed in this respect. Because if we allow the this process, this neurotic process to take over our lives, it will be mainly to give yield to our id, our biological part, our instinctual part that is looking for pleasure and for self-gratification, and it can become violent and also self-centered. So when we do this process in order, then we will be able to achieve liberation. And basically, there is one part in our mental construct that is the one that makes decisions. And this is important. All the others are techniques, are means of achieving something, but they are not the goal. The goal is to achieve self-control in order to have the mind be peaceful and reach enlightenment. This is my dissertation. Thank you.
Vladimir ji, it's such a pleasure and privilege to listen to your words. I always feel that the knowledge is universal, and holistic. Sometimes we call it as psychology, sometimes spirituality. You beautifully combined the findings of the modern psychology, neurology with the Vedantic yogic tradition. Once again, thank you very much and namaste.
Namaste.
On behalf of United Consciousness, I thank Mr. Valdmer Prado for coming onto the platform of United Consciousness and sharing his views. Thank you so much.